Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. My guest in this episode is Grant Smith. Grant is a professional soldier who has served for over 20 years to include numerous combat deployments. He is also a husband and father to 3 children, and the point of this episode is to share his story and inspire others to overcome their challenges. Now, Grant's powerful story and advice are for everyone. This is not unique to only dads. We will certainly cover fatherhood in this episode, but there is so much from Grant's story that is going to help every single person if you are willing to listen and learn. So dive into this episode, take some notes, and prepare to learn from Grant's incredible story and his generous heart. He shares his struggles of having an estranged relationship with his father, as well as a young man struggling with his identity and other things like that. We also cover later in life how he struggled professionally and personally, to include bouts of alcoholism and how he overcame these significant challenges for himself. His generous heart pours out through his story, and you can really see that his primary mission and focus in life is to help others succeed where he has failed. Again, this is not just for dads, this is for everyone. So whatever your struggles may be, listen to Grant's story with an open mind and take to heart the lessons he is sharing in this episode. I am so grateful for his willingness to share in the example he is setting for men to step up and be honest about their struggles to help others live a better life. So let's dive into Grant's story. But before we do, please like and subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, please leave us a review for this episode. It significantly helps us get this out to more people so that stories like Grant's can make a positive and powerful impact in our culture. It will raise a strong generation for our families and for our country. So with that, let's dive into the episode. Thanks for watching. We love every single one of you. Here is Grant Smith. Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. I have a very special guest in studio with me. We're going to pop his face-to-face podcast cherry here, live from To the Moon Creative. Grant Smith, welcome. How are you, brother?
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real honor to be here with you, George.
Yeah, I feel the same. I'm stoked to get your story out. And like I said, first in-person one for you, so this is exciting. I get to be the guy to walk you through it. And why don't you start by... Well, let me high-level summary, and then you fill in all the gaps I'm likely going to miss here. So you've been in the Army for 26 years. You've done 8 deployments, 4 of them combat tours. You are a husband and father. You have 3 children who are all adopted. And what's next for you in terms of your career is you are going to the Sergeant's Major Academy in July, the resident course. So
absolutely.
You are on your way to being a big smudge.
Yeah, big smudge, and making sure people stay off the grass for all the military guys and girls out there that love that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Spent a lot of time in the military. Obviously blessed to be a husband and father, and just trying to give back and spend this back half of my career giving back where I can to others through leadership and inspiration, motivation. They're all catchphrases and buzzwords, but I'm really trying to pour into what I think is my most valuable gift is building relationships and interacting with other people. Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of jokes about Army leaders and stuff, but good Army leaders have a passion for wanting to develop others and help others be better, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things that separates us from so many other organizations, right? Training our replacements and sharing our lessons learned with the next generation, what I commonly refer to as the next generation of great leaders. That's what I'm trying to get after with my platform and having these conversations. Yeah. I think too often the military kind of looks at leadership in a certain way. I think more recently the aperture is starting to open a little bit, a lot more agile and nimble senior leaders. And that's one of my main targets, people that are in my age group or my pay grade, to try to give them some tools that I've learned to try to shape the next generation of great leaders.
Right. All right. Well, let's dive into your background. I know there's a lot to cover, and I think just from what you know of my story and I know of your story, there's a surprising amount of overlap on a lot of different things. So we're a little bit of kindred spirits there. But why don't you, talk to us about your early childhood? You told me that your dad basically never really lived with you. So
yeah, as far back as I can remember, there's no memory of my father living in my house, right? So, there was stuff going on between him and my mom, before I was born, at an early age for me. Okay. He was in my life. I just want to make sure. I know in the past I may have shaped it a little differently. He was in my life, but for a lot of those years when I was really young, it was showing up to school events and things like that. Okay. And then later he moved away. But yeah, never having lived with us.
Gotcha.
So essentially growing up, single mother. I have an older brother, and then my dad would visit and he would take us to games and all that. So for all intents and purposes, it's not that he wasn't there when he needed to be. Mm-hmm. Of course, there was times where he wasn't. But that whole thing with my dad and that kind of trauma and baggage, so to speak, didn't really start with my father and I until I was about 12.
Okay.
When he moved out of the state. And so, yeah, that, just to go back around, grew up as a normal kid, played sports, very average to below average student, just kind of wasn't into it.
Yeah.
Always kind of looked at myself as not the smart kid and not the athletic. I mean, quasi-athletic when I was a kid. Nothing that I was ever going to turn into a profession. Although my dream when I was a kid was to be a professional baseball player, which, that career ended for me in high school, right? My professional baseball career formally ended in high school. So, yeah, I mean, the basic stuff when I was a kid, nothing super spectacular. That's the one thing I want to highlight right in the beginning for everybody listening is I'm so honored and humbled to be here to share my story because I really believe that my story will resonate with so many people out there that have things like this. Not everybody has to have the most catastrophic things go on in order to have a bad outcome, right? So if you're listening out there and you think that your story isn't making you unique and special, you're wrong. You have the ability to impact others with whatever you went through. It doesn't have to be explosions and horrific things. Trauma is the same. Pain is the same. It's the details that are different in each one of these things.
That I'd written this down because I wanted to get to this exact topic, and I'd say let's just dive into it right now because it'll actually kind of preview your story anyway. And it's almost this – so we have one group of people who are like they celebrate being a victim, right? Mm-hmm. And, the more victim check boxes you can get, the more celebrated you are, right? There's definitely an element of our culture that aspires to that way of thinking, right?
Absolutely.
I think you and I disagree with that vehemently. But there's this other group then in contrast – and I used to be this guy up until very recently, actually, where we think to what you were just speaking to. Well, I don't have this crazy story. I didn't get my leg blown off, or I didn't have this abusive background, or I didn't overcome a drug addiction or whatever. So, my story is just boring, and I'm average, and I can't help anyone. And it's just simply not true. Most of us are the everyman, right? I feel very much the same. I'm nothing about me is exceptional, right? Nothing in my story is really that crazy. We were just joking about Nick Lavery, right, and his one leg and everything. I have nothing in relation in terms of the intensity of things I've had to overcome in my life to that. However, I've found that I can help a boatload of people by sharing my stuff and how I've overcome them and whatever. So, thank you for making that point up front that whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you've been through, still will hold some value to someone if you're willing to share your story and look for those needing your help. And in some cases, maybe because you are the everyman, so to speak, you're able to connect to someone way better because they can actually be like, you know what? I'm a lot like this guy. You see the big superstar or whatever, right? And you're like, oh, I can never be like that guy. There's almost like too much space between.
Right. Believe it or not, even when you look at trauma or pain or any of these things, let's say somebody out there is addicted to drugs. Let's just use that generalized term. And they see someone that's bigger than life in Hollywood or sports that's addicted to drugs. Yeah. Although their pain thing or their trauma thing might be the same. They might both be addicted to drugs. The rational human brain is never going to connect that Joe Q Public and XYZ Superstar, they're both addicted to drugs. They're never going to think that correlation is there because of all those other things. So the dichotomy is really strange. You could have the same triggers and traumas as somebody else, but if your life isn't anywhere similar to that, you're going to disassociate yourself with that. Yeah. And I think the way you talked about the everyman, I think that is where there's a fine line between being humble and understanding that, hey, I don't want to sound like I'm better than anybody. I'm not trying to sound like what I have to say is gospel.
Right.
However, the majority of the world in our age demographic is, I'm guessing here, is dealing with things that maybe you and I have gone through and others like us have gone through. You know, you're in the service, so am I. We see a cross section of people that range from catastrophic things to not getting an A on a placement test prior to going to the college of their choice, and now they're in the military.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of value in meeting humans, much like Jesus, at their place of need, at their point. I can connect with people that have had similar stories to me, I think on a far better level than somebody that had a similar story but now is somewhere that seems unattainable, right? Imagine when you were going through all of your stuff, you know, your stuff that you've shared on episode 46, part 1 and 2. Imagine if there was somebody out there that was dealing with a lot of the same things that just happened to turn your podcast on when they were head in hands at the bottom of a bottle at the edge of their proverbial cliff.
Yeah.
And they turned on that show and they heard you share that.
Right.
You had the potential there without even knowing it to impact them and start their legacy like you've been talking about recently immediately.
Yeah.
You've done that. And what an awesome thing that we're put on this earth, that some conversations that we can have, like we're having now, it may not get to 9 million people.
Yeah.
But if it gets to 1,
exactly,
then we're doing okay, right? That's our God-given ability to do that, be in community.
Yeah. And that's what I want people to take away from this too, is like you know, all of us have gone through something. Varying degrees of whatever that something is. Maybe it's lots of somethings for some people. None of that makes you more or less qualified. Like I was talking in a recent video about like men eliminate themselves from the picture because they think they're not qualified. And it's like, it says who?
Yeah.
If it helps someone, guess what? It's qualified. If you can connect with someone on a human level and be like, hey man, I don't have all the answers, but I have figured this out. This helped me. Why don't you try that? And it helps them. Congratulations. You were the most qualified person for that person in need.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
I mean?
It's like when you get a second opinion or you're car shopping, right? You're looking for a standard sedan. Well, there's a million of them out there. Like what makes you as the driver of a car you've never driven, what makes you qualified to think that sedan A is better than sedan B, right? Well, hey, my friend's got a Camry, so drive a Camry, right? So you're right. There's so many parallels with that. And I think as men especially and as soldiers, but mainly men, like it's our responsibility to put these things out there. It's kind of like our mission, right? To give back and to do, maybe we can be the protector, the healer that's kind of innate in what we are as God designed humans. I actually feel it's more of a disservice when we don't share these things, right?
Yeah,
when we have the ability.
See all the success.
Yeah.
You know, they say nothing that it took to get there.
Yeah, nobody really wants to know about all of my things that led me to the Sergeant Major Academy.
They want to know.
In the blink of an eye, right? They go, oh, that must be awesome. He's doing so great.
Yeah.
Well, sure, I've worked hard, and yes, I've had a lot of great luck and amazing leaders, but not every day leading up to what I'm going to start July 15th has been sunshine and rainbows. Oh, and by the way, if you aspire to do this like I have for a long time, perhaps there's something in my story, whether it's military or personal life, that will unlock that or untie that knot for you so you can get after your goals, much like you said recently, right? So I think we're completely in sync with that, and there's no doubt in my mind now that I'm talking to you in person and looking you in the eyes, there's no doubt in my mind why we cross paths.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, well, so it's funny because it was David Waldy who was like, hey, I connected with this dude. You should totally look into him and reach out to him. And
which,
I did,
David, if you're listening, thank you so much because I got connected through David just on social media because I watched a live he did with one of my social media friends. A lot of like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon sort of thing. He reached out to me. It was awesome. I applaud David for that. He reached out to me and asked me kind of what did I want to do. And he's like, maybe you should connect. And that's kind of how it worked out. So it's awesome to see that when like-minded people have such a great thing, when they use social media the right way, in my opinion, It's awesome. Like just connecting here. If this goes nowhere, like I already feel like so blessed to be here and excited just to be in community with you. You know what I mean?
We're only
it's
here
awesome.
because me and my friends decided to start a podcast almost 2 years ago.
Yeah,
you know, like
it's awesome.
Like the amount of things had to spin, you know, in a certain way for not an accident.
Not an accident.
Shout out David Waldy. Thanks for making this episode possible.
Absolutely.
Check out The Ardent Man while you're at it. Shameless plug for him. Anyway, so let's get back to you, Grant.
Yep.
Thanks for diving into that topic.
Absolutely.
And let me close with one thing on that thread. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, okay, that sounds nice. You know, it's easy for these guys to talk about it, and like we're some special people. But that was sarcasm for those listening. Just stop. That mindset is that it's the world has pushed you on that, or someone has told you that, like, oh, because you're not this thing, you can't do anything of value. It's just not true. It's just, I've seen it over and over and over and over with people who are not exceptional make such an impact in other people's lives. And like, I'm thinking just even in my own experience, the people who have poured into me, who no one will ever know their names publicly, you know, they're not famous people, the life-altering changes that they gave me through their counsel or kind word when I needed it or whatever it was, saved my life. You know, I'm only here recording this right now with you because I've had some key people be that for me. So maybe you listening right now are that person for someone else. So whenever you have that doubt of, well, maybe I'm not the right guy or maybe I'm not the right person, just shut that down. It's not true. If it's someone that you care about and you know that you can connect with them, you are absolutely the right person. And I think that's the problem with our society today is too many people don't engage. They stay distant. Well, you know, someone else is better than me. Maybe not. Probably not. You're probably the best person in that moment. So
yeah, I mean, all those feelings that we have about inadequacies and shame and self-doubt that you've been talking about most recently, the good thing is they're all true and they're all valid, right? Like all feelings are valid. It's what we do with those. It's like everyone talks about now between separating the stimulus from the response, right? Yeah. So having those feelings, if you're listening out there, I've had those feelings too, and so is George.
I still do. Like
we still have those.
You have
feelings.
8 deployments. I have 1.
Yeah, we still have those feelings, but the beauty of it is we're here in community together, right? There's nothing that you cannot overcome if you allow yourselves to be a little bit vulnerable. You allow yourselves to be in community, as my good friend Chip Chaddock says. It's not necessarily about being in friendship with people, which it 100% is, but the word he uses is in counsel, much like you said, right? So mentor is a strong word and a pillar, which we should all look for. But there's another level when you add the phrase or the relationship of counselor, maybe not a mental health counselor, but to be in someone's counsel is somebody that you know and trust and understand, a trusted advisor. So we want to be that for people, and we're not talking about a trusted advisor for some high-level things. We're talking about how do you wake up in the morning and work out, guys. So we want to be in community with like-minded people like us, right?
Yeah. All right. We definitely covered that one very well.
Absolutely.
I want to get back to your story because now that everything we just said is going to make a heck of a lot more sense.
Absolutely.
Moving forward. So you had, in sharing the details with me ahead of time, you said that you had to carry your mom's wounded heart because the way that your dad and mom's relationship fell apart, you essentially became her caretaker in a sense, emotionally.
Even when I look back at that, not really. I mean, kind of. I'll get into that. So, you know, much like what you talked about on your episode with what you referred to as like emotional incest. This was not the case there. I've rethought about this since I've re-listened to your stuff. What I mean by that is a lot of those elements that you described were not there. But what was there is my mom, to her credit, has always spoken very, very, very highly of my father. And for the longest time, nobody knew, before he moved out of state, nobody knew that he wasn't in our house because he was showing up to games and recitals and all these things.
Okay.
However, because of the relationship I've always had with my mother, I just started to take on the things because I cared so much for her. I just started to she didn't put them on me. Yeah. She did not put them on me. I naturally gravitated towards feeling that she had been wronged. Yeah. And that
so it was almost like codependency.
Yeah, like she had been wrong. Look at all these amazing things she's doing in her work for my brother and I, putting food on the table. how could this guy do these things kind of thing. So it was self-imposed.
Okay.
For sure. My mom never said, hey, carry this weight for me. I'm not strong enough. My mom is a pillar of strength and Christianity and all that, and always has been.
Okay.
I just took it upon myself because although I was the younger brother, my brother and I have completely different personalities.
Okay.
I've always been more of an alpha and more of the guy in front. So by default, I just took that on myself. And what that did was I morphed. I found this out later, which we'll talk about. I morphed a lot of those things that she had since forgiven my father about. I had morphed those into creating a wedge and pain and stress and trauma between my father and I.
Okay.
So naturally, when he moves out of the state at 12 years old, right after the Gulf War, so little date myself there. I mean, I was a young guy still. Don't worry, guys.
Super young.
Super young. At 12 years old, when he moves away, I look back now and I think that's when I needed my quote-unquote father the most, right? I'm getting ready to transition as a man. I want to play high school sports or junior high than high school sports. I want to go to dances and learn how to drive, right? All these things that we, society has leaned more towards, in a traditional role, guys throwing baseballs, whatever.
Yeah.
So as these things are going on, I'm fabricating all these things in my head. Now, granted, my dad's behavior, and we've since had a great, amazing relationship. We can get into more of that later. My dad is also not really exhibiting the greatest behavior as this is happening.
Okay.
I don't want to tell his part of the story, just like I respected so much the way you kind of paused at that part on 46 with your stuff. It's my dad's story to tell.
Yeah.
But there was some exhibited behaviors that were going on that I just wasn't a fan of.
Right.
And that just perpetuated the way I felt about, well, he was wrong here. He's doing this now. He's kind of lying or doing some stuff that's not above board here. So I just kept making this up in my head. Some of it was actual, but the wedge that was created, come to find out, was not something that I fully discovered until most recently, which was, to this day, my father has never put me down.
Like
not
in terms
one
of
time.
His words, you never said anything.
Not one time. In my whole life, every stupid decision I've ever made, every crazy thing I've done, he's always been supportive. I was fabricating what I thought to be the reason why I had all this trauma.
So you created a filter.
100%.
And so because you had this negativity filter, no matter what.
The negativity bias. It doesn't matter what my dad said. He left. He's wrong. He hurt my mom. I will show him. I will hold him captive by what he did or didn't do.
Gotcha.
I will create the distance. I'm a man. You can't tell me what to do. You weren't here when I was 16, or physically here. You weren't physically here when I was 16. When I went off to active duty at a young age, I was making that decision. So it was a weird, perfect storm of events with a lot of things going on that led me to just continue to create that gap. Again, there was things he wasn't doing right or wrong, in my opinion. And that kind of carried on for, honestly, if I'm being 100% honest, man, which I am, I put that before God over the last 9 years when I became a Christian in 2015. The cool thing is, not to get overly religious, the more I thought about it and wanted to hurt him and yell at him and put him down for everything that he did or didn't do in my head, the more I wanted him to be in pain, the more God took it off my heart. The tighter I gripped around fixing my father and all the things that he did wrong to me, the more I drew closer to my walk in faith. And this Christmas, I had a breakdown moment. I had planned on yelling at my dad numerous times over the last decade or maybe 15 years, pinning him down, telling him why he left my mom, why all those things happened. I was going to be the man. I'm a tough combat veteran. I'm going to show him who the man is. That conversation never happened by the grace of God. What actually happened was the more I strangled it, the more it got released from my heart, and the more I started to see things for what they truly were. My dad has made a lot of mistakes, like we all have.
Yeah.
So has my mom. So have you.
Right.
So have I. My mom says to me, I told my mom most recently, my dad doesn't deserve my grace. And she said, God freely gives us grace, Grant.
Yeah.
It's not really right of you to hold back your heart and the grace from your Father, essentially paralleling the walk of Jesus.
Yeah.
And on Christmas Day at my house here in Tennessee, I just broke down crying and said all the things that I didn't think I would ever say to my dad, which was, you never let me down. You stuck by my side. You were patient in waiting for my walk with faith to catch up with yours. You loved me unconditionally despite all these things that I've done. You were patient when I created a wedge and wanted to hate you all these years.
Yeah.
And he just broke down in absolute tears, and we hugged in the kitchen. And that was the end of a 32-year chapter in my life of pain and hurt and guilt and shame that partially he did, mostly I did. And it's been one of the biggest weights ever lifted off my shoulders.
Yeah, I can only imagine, man.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
It's literally shaped my entire life.
Yeah.
Everything that I've done bad, I could easily blame my dad. He wasn't there.
Yeah.
Right? Why did I make this decision? Well, my dad wasn't physically in my house to tell me not to, right?
Right.
Super easy to push things on him and not own any of it my sake. I know there's a weird dichotomy in the world now between ownership and, what a guy should do and not do. I definitely put a lot of value in owning certain mistakes that we have, right? I definitely am an extreme ownership guy. We're like, hey, I did this. I know that I created this. I can't say that what he did was right or wrong. That's his story. But I look back on all those years, and everything that I did, so many things that I did, were through the lens of getting back at my dad. Or this was because my dad did or didn't do X, Y, Z. And, I lived with that guilt and shame and that sorrow and hurt and pain, and had no idea what I was doing when we had children because of that. I never saw it really modeled in my house at that age.
Yeah.
The two parents doing diapers, whatever, the stuff. I had no idea what I was doing. It was never modeled for me.
Right.
So when I made errors as a parent, well, it's because he wasn't there, right?
Exactly.
Not because
it just never stops.
It never stops. It never stops. Well, the good news story, not even through this podcast yet, is by the grace of God, that story in my life, that chapter of my life, 32 years, which is most books in many stories, it's over.
Yeah.
Which was one of the most amazing feelings that I've had as a grown man.
Yeah.
And it was so recent. It was literally this Christmas.
Yeah, just a couple months ago.
And it wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It just spewed out of my mouth in that kitchen. And we had an amazing, just emotional moment. So anyway, that shaped my whole life.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how it was with my dad. Not as long, but it was a little bit unplanned. I kind of knew that I wanted to just be like clear the air type of thing. Well, I need to back up. I went to this place called Onsite. It's a very like intensive experiential therapy type thing. You do a lot of group work with other people, and at the end, this was my second time there.
You get like a coupon the second time?
Yeah, well, so the first time we went as a couple, and then this one I went just for me to work on my stuff. And they had a labyrinth, and you physically held some, I forget what it was. Like you made a memento of something, like a totem, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, my totem was the anger I felt towards my dad. And so I walked the labyrinth, and I left it in the middle, and I walked out. And the whole time I was just saying, I forgive him. I don't want to carry this anymore. And so then he came and visited me very shortly after that. And it was totally unplanned. We were picking up barbecue for the family to eat dinner. And as we got to the parking lot, I was just like, hey, Dad, like, I just miss having a relationship with you. I'm not even mad anymore. I'm really sorry. And it was very similar to how you just described you and your dad in the kitchen. It was just a long time overdue, And
Yeah, and he had this expression too. I can imagine how your father must have felt also based on my own personal experience. But my father kind of had like this. He didn't really have much to say. And this is like one of those times when you say something to somebody that you're 100% fine with nothing, right? Just the raw emotion that we shared together.
This communication enough.
It spoke louder than any words could have ever said,
Definitely.
And you know, throughout the years prior to that, I mean, we've talked a lot. I mean, he's been to my deployment homecomings. I mean, we did our best. He did better than I did for sure, but we did our best. He went to plenty of my kids' things, right?
Okay.
He was very engaged in that way. I was the one that was keeping it at arm's length, much like I described just previously, where I said he doesn't deserve my grace.
Yeah.
There have been times too, even before this emotional event, that I said he doesn't. Why is he engaging with my children in this way when he wasn't engaging with me in this way?
Right.
And Dad, if you go back and listen to this, you know, I'm not saying that as a fault. This is my baggage that I carried. Like you're being very engaging with them when they're 12, 13, and, you know, you weren't there. But here's the reality of it. I've realized now that he's always done the best that he can.
Yep.
It doesn't mean the outcome was what I wanted. And when I was younger, I didn't realize that. I used to ask my therapist, and I used to ask my mom, and I've talked to my wife about it. Why did my father choose all of those other things in his life over me and my brother?
Right.
Why? How could you be a father and a husband and a man and look at your children and still make the decision that doesn't put you there?
Yeah.
And obviously now, years later, as a father, as a husband, I've been so blessed and honored that I never will be faced with that decision to make independent, you know, like I will never make that decision. And I used to not understand it. But the more I've grown and learned about trauma, the more I've grown and learned about, he's got his own long history of stuff.
Yeah.
The more I've learned about that and how I see people grow, the grace that God gives us is that in that moment, he was doing the best he could.
Right.
If I believe that, then it believes that the redemptive spirit that we all are capable of having is valid, right? Because I do believe that if we give 100%, we may not get a perfect score.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
We may not do that. So again, this has all been, some of this untying has been very recent, but this is a lot of my trajectory. Once I stopped drinking and all these other things, I've been on this just hunt for, like you said recently, just this hunt for reading, growing, doing better. And so many things have been untied on, mistakes I'm still making, and just interactions as a parent, right?
So I remember one point we didn't make when we talked about kind of like the feeling inadequate and stuff. And it's what you just said right there is, I think a lot of people too, they think, well, I haven't been through all that trauma, or I haven't been through all that stuff. So, you know, I can't like have the same outcome as this incredible person who overcame this crazy situation, right? Also, very untrue. The goal is to not have all that trauma. The goal is to not have to put yourself back together after being broken into pieces. If you're in a place where you're listening to this and like, I really haven't been through anything that much, great. You can take all the concepts and because you're already at a place of wellness and, you know, being holistically pretty good. Maybe you don't have as much threshold for pain or whatever as the person with the crazy thing, but you can take all the lessons and just start stacking wins, because you don't have to, like for us, we had to repair decades worth of issues
to get to
that
what
slows you down.
To get to what's their baseline.
If you're listening and you're like, oh, well, you know, I really haven't been through that much. Great. Perfect. You are like literally, you're going to excel faster because you are operating from a position of strength already, right? And if you have to overcome tons of trauma, like you have so many things you have to fix first. You can't really do huge strides forward because you're in like survival mode, you know? So
you don't have to build the plane in flight, right? You're already like, you're just getting in the plane and you're ready to take off, where we're like, the wings off.
And that is definitely the ideal. And especially then when you transfer that to parenthood, right? Like I think, you know, I've maybe seen this trend starting a little bit where it's like, well, they live too comfortably now or something, so they're not going to be able to be adults. Okay, you can manufacture the hardship. You can train the lessons about overcoming adversity without being traumatic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I much rather would have learned some of my lessons through manufactured hardship as opposed to genuine trauma
100%.
that I stuffed down and buried for 10 plus years of my life and had to then rip it out later. It's like killing a piece of yourself.
Yeah.
So
for anybody listening, the what he's describing there is from the other side, I will say that's true. If you need to put yourself in a bad situation at work temporarily or do something like that, please do that over stuffing away stuff and not dealing with it. Please do that way.
You can. What I mean by like manufacturing hardship is you can say, no, you're going to do this, this, and this because you live under this roof, and that teaches the value of hard work. They don't have to go. You don't have to lose your job.
For sure.
You can teach the lesson without the trauma is what I wanted to get to.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I forgot that point earlier, but I think it applied perfectly.
Absolutely.
So we talked about your relationship with your dad and how that came to fruition. So we kind of jumped over a huge
we jumped over a huge portion, which is good because the basic story of that storyline permeated everything in my life. Everything in my life.
So that's where I want to start getting to is, so we heard kind of how it started and where it got to and how you healed. But, I think a lot of people probably have very, very, very similar feelings to how you felt. And what I want to start with when you joined the Army in 97.
That's it.
Sorry to date you.
Yeah, 1997.
I won't tell you what grade I was in.
That's okay.
We can do that after.
Yeah, we can do it after. The liner notes.
I would imagine you felt a lot like I did in many ways. You probably felt weak, angry about your situation in life. You wanted to feel powerful. You wanted to prove you were a real man. I mean,
definitely all those things, right? So like I didn't do any, like, just to go back, like I didn't do any of that stuff. I played sports, but like, the guns and the bravado and all that, I didn't have any of that. But the last part of my senior year in high school, I was really kind of getting into some trouble. Nothing really serious, but just kind of squirreling around. And I talked about this before. One of the values that I had in the relationship with my mother was that I knew myself enough to know that if I went the traditional, quote unquote, traditional path right into school or trade school or college or trade school, that I would probably flounder around a lot.
Okay.
Maybe not with a direction. So to fully honor all the hard work that my mom did. And now remember, this is, 5-6 years of me creating this image of my father and carrying her trauma up to 17. So I'm pretty well ready to not like my dad at 17 when I get ready to go. I'm at that prime age where I'm just fired up on all cylinders. 5 years of creating this kingdom of nonsense. So I didn't want to bring discredit to my mother and all the hard work she's done raising us. So I was like, maybe I'll do this. My dad was in the military. My grandfather, both are. My dad was in the Army. My grandfather was in the Army. When it was brought up in the past, I didn't put a lot of thought into it.
Okay.
I ended up doing that. So for the reason of honoring all the hard work my mom did and doing something that was going to not just flounder around, along with what you stated about, hey, I want to do something bigger. I want to be part of an organization. I want to do tough stuff. Whatever else. So that's exactly what I decided to do.
Okay. So you joined the Army. I mean, I guess, how did all of your, the filter we talked about, that negativity filter, how did that manifest itself through your career? Because I assume you went active duty first. Okay.
Yeah, active duty. Yeah. So it's funny. I did a post about this recently. The manifestation of my negativity bias in my life was really cemented in basic training, not even past that. I think nobody has ever heard this full story. It's a short one, but they picked me to be the note taker for a drill sergeant wall locker inspection. So the drill sergeant was going to go through. If there was a discrepancy, they would yell it out, whatever, and I would write it down. As we started going through this, I realized that I, too, was able to see the discrepancy sometimes at the same time as the drill sergeant. And sometimes I would state that, oh, there's a penny or the shaving cream is in the wrong spot, and they would note it. And I realized that was an area instantly for growth. If the shaving cream is supposed to be here and it's not there, I can learn how to be that way. I'm going to make this process better. I'm going to atone for the sins and the mistakes that I've made, or this feeling of inadequacy and not being able to play sports as a professional and all these other things, my dad taking off. Well, if I can learn how to teach myself how to be better in every area of my life, what's the best way to do it? Well, you find all the flaws. The flaws is where growth happens, which is a true statement. The flaws and the errors are where growth occurs. So what better way to make yourself better in the Army than point out every flaw that you have? Oh, and subsequently, flaws that other people have too, because that gives you a great opportunity.
Sure, everybody loved you.
They did. To teach, coach, and mentor at a very early age. It never really manifested into that as much, but that's how the negativity of all the stuff led up to that.
Okay.
And that kind of permeated throughout my career. I've talked about it before. So the wave top of the military, joined active duty. I was originally a mechanic in active duty. I kind of fell out of love with that. I wanted to do other things. I got off active duty just before 9/11, missed it immediately, had the opportunity to reclassify or change jobs to become a military policeman. But bunch of deployments prior to the war, a bunch of war deployments. And that, I mean, that's like a nutshell, right? This isn't like a war story thing. So but the important part of that lesson was in 2005, was my first like full-fledged 18-month combat tour in Iraq. I was the most junior platoon sergeant, the lowest ranked platoon sergeant, and on a very specialized team, which with all those things we just talked about, the negativity and all that, I wasn't a bad leader, but I definitely look back and think I could have been a lot better leader.
Yeah.
The reason why is because that negativity bias and that growth mindset was out of control. Every chance I got to point out something, because if that thing wasn't squared away in that situation in Anbar, the Sunni Triangle in 2005, very bad things happened.
Yeah.
If you missed a pre-combat check or pre-combat inspection, something very negative would likely happen.
Right.
So that just made it even worse for me. So now I'm just hyper-focused, hyper-intense, as we've talked about, on all the negativity. Looking back on that, that shaped a lot of the stuff that I've done in the military, is focusing on the negative so I could grow.
Yeah.
So the growth mindset continuum for me started in basic training. Negativity, fault, error, fix, teach, get better.
Yeah.
But I get better, but I'm still not good enough. Why? Because I'm carrying insecurity that I created from my father.
Yeah.
So this circle of nonsense I created in my head. And so if you're listening out there, somebody out there is going through this right now. They're seeking out things to derail from the other parts of their world. They're seeking out things they know they can control, because there's other areas in their life that they're not able to control. And that's what I was doing. I couldn't control the relationship with my mom and my dad prior to me coming into this world. I couldn't control the decisions he made, so many things. So where do I gain control? By finding these errors and all these things, which make me better. You know, the cycle was out of control. Yeah. Out of control.
And it borders on the edge of like tyranny, not leadership, right? Because
the benefit was, just like I used to blame my father, when you're in a high-stress combat situation like that era was, it's not my fault, George.
Yeah.
It's the war's fault.
Right.
Because the war and the outcome of negative and enemy actions will show you that your truck will blow up. So if you fix this, we have a better shot of surviving that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't ever looked at as tyrannical. It was never looked at like that. I've always been very good with the guys and girls. I've never had issues building relationships that way. I was able to craft the message of how important this is.
Sure.
But the backstop of that wasn't tyrannical leadership. It was, if we don't do this, we're going to get killed.
Yeah.
If we don't do this, the backdrop. So it parallels how it was when I was a kid. If Sergeant Gray doesn't square away this ammo can in the back of this truck, if something happens and we flip, whatever, all those stories.
Right.
But it's not my fault. I don't want it that way. The outcome of the enemy determines what we're doing. I'm bad in school and I'm acting like a clown. Well, it's not Grant's fault. It's my dad's fault because he wasn't here to square it away. So I've always been able to project a backdrop against somebody that took all the onus off of me.
All the responsibility. Yeah.
I'm good to go, right? I'm just living my world. I'm living my life. My mom's crushing it. I'm just doing the best I can. with the hand that I was dealt, guys.
Right.
This is not my fault. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm the product of the environment that was created for me.
Yeah. If I can go on a quick tangent,
please.
You know, because I think I was a lot the same. And let me clarify for people who haven't deployed to a combat zone, because it probably sounds really harsh. It is the reality. Like, there is a high intensity over tiny details, attention to detail, situational awareness keeps me alive in combat. There are like the phrases that everyone knows, right? That is just part of the game. You sign up for that when you join, when you go down range. That is like the requirement, right? But what I think a lot of people fail to realize, and I certainly learned it after the fact, was there can be a level of calmness about that without the anxiety of it, right? Mm-hmm. And I was certainly the like over anxious one, like every detail or else, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, you're right, but you're not. You're doing the right things for the wrong reason type of thing.
That hyper calmness over details comes with time and experience. I was lucky enough that I was able to get to that point not too long after that and have remained that way. But you're absolutely right.
I just want to clarify that for people who may not realize that. Like there are, I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, we would spend at least 3 hours before relieving the wire just on final checks.
100%.
Minimum 3 hours at least. Check your ammo, check your radios, check everything's tied down properly, check your fuel, check like air.
Yeah, we eventually in 2010 later, we eventually got to the point where 1.5 or an hour and a half on trucks before SP. We got it down to an hour and a half for all those checks. But initially, early on, 3 hours is standard.
And that's where that like hyper focus on these details comes into play, is because it is to protect you and keep you alive. And if the worst happens, that way it's less severe. And so there is a purpose to it. It's not that everyone in the military is a psycho. Yeah. But the problem is, I think we get conditioned and we take that into all aspects of our life. And I want to talk that in a second. But back to your point of, oh, well, it was always someone else. This happened, so that's why I'm doing this, right? Or because this person did that. Now, and I think the majority of men who are stuck in lives they don't want to be living right now, that is the number one reason. It's someone else's fault. They blame someone. It's this happened to me, or that, or my wife this, or my kids that. BS. I'm going to speak from my own experience here, my own anecdotal experience. My life has significantly improved when I stopped playing that game. When I stopped saying, well, because of someone else, or because of my wife, or because of that, and I looked hard in the mirror and I said, you know what, George, you got to grow the heck up. In this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and the list gets pretty long pretty quick, and I stopped blaming other people. And even when I tried to, the brotherhood I had built around me was like, nope, no way, brother. No. Maybe she did do the wrong thing. Doesn't matter. You did too. Okay. So if more men would stand up right now, surround themselves with some brotherhood who can be that voice of reason when we start telling ourselves our lies, a lot of your problems will start to go away, because most of the problem is actually you. And that's a hard pill to swallow. And we always want to think that we're these big tough guys and I'm large and in charge and I've got all the answers and blah, blah. You probably don't.
Yeah, you nailed it right on the head, George. I mean, I too can attest to the fact that when I started doing a lot better job. I say started because no one's fully actualized.
It's always a process. It's always a little bit.
When I started looking in the mirror, and this happened a lot when I was drinking, a lot, which we'll get to, I'm sure. The more I looked in the mirror and the more I started to work towards owning the things that I was doing right, doing wrong, saying right, saying wrong. It's a double-edged sword, right? You own these things, but then you also still have to give yourself grace. As you're working towards, hey, man, I had a really good day today. I did this X, Y, Z, or I did this bad. It is a double-edged sword there because you're owning all the things, which means, guys out there, when you're owning things, you don't just own the negative because it's a cool narrative in social media. You don't own the things and you're just a growth mindset machine for the rest of your life and you never are present. You also own the good things that you're able to accomplish too, and give yourself your own pat on the back when you do things that are hard or you've done something differently in a relationship or whatever that you haven't done before. So owning, you got to own both of them.
Definitely. I just wanted to be very clear. I think it's where most men play that, it's someone else's fault story is in their marriages and in their role as dads. It's, well, I didn't learn how to be a good enough dad. That's why. Well, guess what? your kids only get you once. Mm-hmm. They only get to have their childhood once. So the stakes are kind of high, bro. You know, mm-hmm. like just swallow the hard pill and start fixing it, because whatever incremental improvement you can make is that much more multiplied in your children's lives or now in your marriage. Mm-hmm. And so that's the point I just want to make, because I think there's been people tap dancing around that and not saying, look, man, the standard is here. Come meet us, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not a judgment thing. It's not looking down on you. Because like I just said, I needed to grow. I was not a very good husband. I had a lot of work to do to grow up as a husband. As a 30-something-year-old man, I was like, hey.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same.
When I was honest with myself, it was like.
Yeah, I had to take a lot of those hard lessons too. Yeah. I said previously that I blame my dad for those things, but I'm to the point in my life now where I look back and know that was a facade, mm-hmm. which is also a hard pill to take, realizing that some of the things I did or didn't do early on with my older kids was my fault. Sure, there with my wife, it's a collective effort in our house. We don't have the traditional roles. We kind of just, do things as needed, so to speak. But I had to own that as well. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I made a lot of mistakes here and here and here. And, it's tough. Yeah. It's definitely tough. But it's achievable.
Yes. It's worth it.
Getting on the other side of mistakes that you've made, they're not fatal. At this point in my life, I have never made a fatal error. Never. So if I haven't made one now, not to say that I couldn't, but all these mistakes that I may or may not have made that I've owned, I'm still here today, mm-hmm. and I'm trying to do better each day, just like we all are, right? Yeah. So if you're out there and you have made a mistake and there's a separation maybe between you and your spouse or you and your kids, guys and girls, it's not the end of the world. It mm-hmm. is redeemable. Yeah. 100% redeemable.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, in my own life, my wife and I were literally on the brink of, had a lawyer on retainer.
Yeah.
And here we are. We've been married over 10 years, Yeah. So and when I reflect back on it, for all her faults, whatever they were, if I would have just owned my stuff more earlier, I don't know if she would have made as many mistakes. You know what I mean? You can play the what-if game all day, but at the end of the day, the more that I leaned into it and stopped making excuses and accepted the input I needed, not what I wanted, mm-hmm. life got better.
Absolutely.
So, and it's continuing to do so. So, yeah, man, time to lean into it and embrace it.
Yeah.
So we talked about the intensity on deployments and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you were growing as a leader in the mm-hmm. Army. When did you meet your wife? When did you get married? When did you adopt your first two?
Yeah. So that 05-06 deployment, my wife and I had kind of been talking online a little bit.
Okay.
And this was even back in the
AOL,
day. Yeah, it was like AOL, Yahoo Chat.
Yeah, and stuff. AOL Instant Messenger.
Truth be told, we have shared this story, but there was a website back in the day. I hopefully my wife will listen to this part. She always gets a kick out of this part. She shares this all the time too.
I'll cut it as a reel.
No, yeah, it's good. Yeah.
It'll be a nice bite-sized clip.
There was a website out there called Hot or Not. And it's essentially you post just a still picture of yourself. You look at whatever you want to look at, male, female, whatever, and then you rate them on whatever. And you kind of it was kind of like the
hotornot.com.
Hotornot.com.
Yeah.
So
I was never on it, but I remember hearing all the references and everything.
So we what they refer to as double matched on that, meaning she thought I was hot and I thought she was hot, right? Super awesome way.
The basis for every successful marriage.
Every successful, almost 17-year marriage should be built on hotornot.com. Anyway,
I mean, attraction is important.
Absolutely. But, it was... So we met on that. I got home from that deployment. We kind of linked up together. The interesting part of our story is as soon as I got home from that deployment, we got together. I almost immediately was drawn to her, and I'm not saying that I knew that I wanted to marry her right away, but pretty quickly. We had 2 really amazing dates. Why this is important is because this is where the story gets really fun. We had 2 very important dates. Those would be date 1 and date 2, and then immediately after that, our daughter was placed in our house.
Wow.
So my wife had been in the process of adopting our oldest daughter.
Okay.
When I came into the picture, as I was growing and falling in love in 2 dates, I realized that I'm accepting or 100% willing to accept her and this child that is going to come into
Okay.
Her life, now our lives. So not too long after our amazing dating days, which is what we refer to them as now.
All two
dates over a couple of days. I move in with her, and my daughter comes into the house, and we're an instant family of 3. Subsequently later, obviously, you know, we get married, we finalize the adoption as the 3 of us, right? So that was it. Then instant husband, wife, that was 06. Proposed to her Valentine's Day. I picked a day that was cliche, but she least expected it. I kind of did some reverse psychology on her. She claims I didn't, but I 100% did. It's like she knows me that I'm not like the cliche guy. I'll do everything opposite of that. So what anti-cliche way to do it than on the most cliche day? It's a lot of mind games. She said yes, regardless, and we got married, and then we started instant family. And our daughter was 2.5 years old when we adopted her. And then not long after that, a cool part of the story that some people know, some don't. I actually then became a bodyguard. I got into the executive protection world.
Because you were in the reserves now?
Yeah. I was in the reserves. I got into the bodyguard world, which was awesome. Did that in California up until the time I deployed again. And that was awesome. Worked for a high net worth family in Southern California. All the things you would think about, kind of in the movies, right? There was I can't get a lot of detail, but you know, we had cool cars, we had, you know, guns and gear. It was a really legit operation. It wasn't a contract. We got hired. Me and my teammates, we worked for one family,
right,
and their extended family, and we did all their stuff all over the world and stuff. It was great. Great experience. I love that family to death. I don't know if any of you guys would ever listen to this kind of stuff. It's not really your forte, but if you are, I love you guys still forever. Then I go to Afghanistan. During the Afghanistan tour, which was another deployment to Iraq in 2010.
Okay.
Come back from that, kind of flounder around. That's when I really that's when I really kind of started to. I mean, I've always drank in the military. It's kind of a sport. It's kind of an MOS. Or if you're listening out there, MOS is...
It's an additional duty.
Yeah, it's definitely additional duty to drink. Always did that, but within normal reason.
Right.
Sure, did I go out and get, you know, really drunk when I was living in Germany? Sure.
Yeah.
But I started kind of...
Work hard, play hard.
Yeah, kind of started looking into doing some additional stuff, you know, kind of drinking on and off, but nothing bad. Go to Iraq, come back. Iraq then is... I see you have the fitness thing on there. I'd kind of always struggled with being 10 to 20, sometimes more pounds overweight as a kid. Even when I joined, I had to lose a little bit of weight. Part of my story that a lot of people, on my Instagram, I did a thing about it. When I first went to join, I couldn't do the bare minimum 13 push-ups.
Really?
Yeah, which a lot of people look at me now, yourself probably included, and you hear, there's no way that's possible. 100% possible. I got recycled. I ended up doing it again and going through. So I always kind of struggled with that. Then I used to lift heavy and do all these things. This will get to a point, I promise. Then in 2010, I decided I was going to totally revolutionize my fitness and diet exercise regime.
Okay.
Came back from that, looked different, acted different, you know, totally different mindset with all that stuff. So that was kind of the start where I was like, hey, I want to do something. I can do it. I have the knowledge. I have the know-how. Let's get after it. Let's reshape your body to, and I'm not saying I was you know, obese or anything like that. But, you know, between 6'2" and 3, I was somewhere between 225, 230, but not always the greatest version of 225, 230.
Yeah.
That deployment comes and goes, pretty good deployment, nothing significant really for this one. 2013, getting ready to go to Afghanistan. Just before that, my wife and I were pretty much just cohabitating in our house in California. I was working the bodyguard job, taking care of my daughter. She was working, taking care of the daughter. I was on what they refer to as a swing shift, which for me at that time was, you know, 2 p.m. to midnight. We were just kind of 2 shifts passing in the night, as everyone's kind of heard that phrase. Started drinking a little bit more. Go to Afghanistan. While we're in Afghanistan, my wife has a leap of faith, and we decide to move to Middle Tennessee. No jobs. No anything. She had been really, really close with some Gold Star families here in Franklin area. And she loved it. We decided to move to Tennessee.
Okay. So did she make that decision while you were downrange?
We actually made it together. We made it together. She said she wanted to move to Tennessee. We had already in California been looking at maybe getting a different house. We'd kind of looked at maybe upgrading or doing some stuff. When she presented
Is she from Cali?
Yeah, we're both from Cali.
You're both from California?
Both from Cali,
okay.
Yeah.
I'll let that slide.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
I'm from Oregon.
Yeah.
I guess any better.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely some strong similarities and some differences for sure. But we decided together to do that.
Okay.
It was like she presented it to me, and I was like,
"Gotcha."
We really wanted something different. I wanted to get away from doing the bodyguard stuff.
Okay.
And so we just decided to move out here. And why that part is important, all the deployment stuff all happened.
Yep.
Why that's critical is because for the first time in my life, I've always used Southern California as a home base. No matter what I did in the Army, my mom was there for a long time. Everybody was there. I grew up there. I knew everything about everything in my little small, in that enclave. Orange County is big, but I never needed a map. I never needed anything.
Right.
I could just get around, do my thing. Well, culmination of, post-traumatic stress and things that had occurred, when I landed in Middle Tennessee, my wife was working. I had no job. My daughter was in school. I had no idea what to do.
Mm.
I didn't know what I was going to do for work. I didn't know what this thing called a MAPCO was. I didn't know. I'd never heard these words before. I had no idea how to get to
It's a gas station for those listening.
Yeah, I didn't know how to get to the store.
Yeah.
I knew nothing. And that was not a position that I had been in the military. Sure, you go to different areas, but you're with the guys and girls in the military,
with
right? Doesn't matter. You know what to do. Military, civilian, I'm in Cali, whatever. Well, now I decide that this is probably going to be the start of the rise of my really significant drinking, because I'm dealing with, depression, anxiety, feeling out of place, not sure what holds for me. I was super excited that we lived here. I was all in for the move. But I had no idea the level of stress that was going to put on me for the unknown, something I hadn't really fully dealt with ever.
Do you, referencing, he said this with us, Nick Kumalazos said that, like when you're going that fast and you're doing all that stuff, and he was kind of referring to his military career, and then he just got out. It's like, it's a freight train moving really fast, and then you just stop, and it like slammed you. Is that kind of what it felt like, where you just like, you didn't have time to really go through and think about anything that had really happened? And
it was
for the first time you actually stopped, and so it just hit you?
I mean, that's a great point. It was similar to that. I mean, I've kind of, once I got off active duty, I've done things in the military.
Sure.
And definitely the bodyguard job was fast paced. But the reference you're making is perfect in that I had all that pent up energy of this go, but I didn't have a direction.
Yeah, you had nowhere to.
I had nowhere to put it. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a church. I wasn't a Christian yet. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I worked out. I went to the gym a whole bunch.
You feel aimless?
Completely.
Yeah. I
knew I was going to want to maybe get into the security world again because that was comfortable.
Did you feel like you were a failure or something? Like, I mean, I'm just trying to peel the onion a little bit on everything that you were, because I think that's something that a lot of guys can relate to. This feeling of like you were something and now you're not. So what?
Like I had so much of my identity wrapped around military, living in Cali, not so much identity in that, but the living situation for me, I think, is what threw me off. All the things I did in the military, I always home based out of California.
Okay.
The airports, everything. I mean, everything about this was so foreign to me, and it was so weird. Looking back on it now, not so much a failure, but I'm like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I know I want to get a job, but it was like for the first time in my adult life, we didn't have any friends here. She had her friend that she had met.
Right.
I had no network. I was a reservist. We get back from deployment. Hey, go back to your world. Well, the world that I thought I was going back to was in Southern Cal. We agreed, so I'm not saying she did that. But
right.
In my head, when the reserves at that point says, hey, they give you the stuff. I'm not bad-mouthing them. They give you what you need, essentially. But when you go back to where
you're off
off the clock.
Yep.
So when you go back there, everything that I had remembered about an infrastructure and friends and all that, I didn't have that. My mom wasn't there. My dad wasn't there. Nobody was there. My wife went to work. My daughter went to school. I was in the house. Okay, cool. Work out. Look for jobs. It's very strange. And it caused a lot of, not so much failure, but I was like, okay, how do I fix this? What am I going to do? Well, obviously, I wasn't like day drinking at this point, but I was like, what am I going to do? Okay, look for jobs. That kind of did that. And I just I ended up getting a job, obviously. But I was just dealing with so many things. The thoughts of my father were coming back. The thoughts of I'm going to fail my family here because the job that I just found is about almost one-fourth of what I was making in California. Gotcha. Almost. Maybe the ratio is not, it's close enough.
A lot less.
What am I going to do? What am I going to do? All these things. I'm insignificant. I'm insecure. Am I going to be able to stay in shape? How am I? All these things. You know, the flood of emotions and the negative self-talk is killing me. So obviously, I'm drinking is fine. I'm kind of drinking a little bit at night. Then we moved. Then we built a house. We had some money from house sales. We build a house. We get into an awesome community, and it's kind of like party time. I'm kind of getting established a little bit, so I'm just dealing with demons, drinking, and really just kind of treading water. I'm not really doing much. My military career is fine. I find a new unit.
Right.
I'm doing great there.
But it's part-time.
Yeah, but I'm full. I get back into this job where I'm back in 2016.
Oh, you got like
I got like an 8
a full-time position. Okay.
So I'm doing all these random things like a month here, 2 months there. I'm digging into that.
Gotcha.
What a lot of people don't see, and I know you're out there, I was doing all this while I was trying to be the best husband and father, all while I was still overusing alcohol. And then a couple of years after that, we adopted my middle son. And again, they have their own unique stories, but I will say that with both of them, just like everybody else in this world, they came into this world and things happened in their lives that brought them to their crossroads in their life too. Let's just put it that way. So I'm juggling all these identities. I want to be really good in the military, but I feel so shameful. You just talked about this recently, because if anybody knew how much I was overusing alcohol, they wouldn't think I was a good leader.
Yeah.
I'm going overboard now. This isn't just the guys being guys and drinking after a mission. My wife loves me and supports me and sees how much pain I'm in. I know that I shouldn't be drinking because it's not healthy for our marriage and our relationship. But I'm being arrogant, and she's telling me she doesn't like it, but she's not giving me any ultimatums. Oh, and over here I found this church group now. I just became a Christian, and this is really healthy for my growth. But I also still like drinking because I'm not quite at the point yet, right? So this is 2016, 17, somewhere in there.
Okay.
17, 18 is probably like the height of my drinking all the time. Not during work. I'm still going to work. I'm still holding down a great job. I'm still doing all these things. I think I'm doing a good job hiding it. I know now that I wasn't.
Okay.
I think I am because I'm drinking at night. I'm drinking on the weekends. I'm not gaining a bunch of weight. I'm still working out, right? So I'm doing a great job. Of
looking the part.
Yeah, man, I'm doing great. Army's going good. Marriage is amazing.
Was it really?
Work? No.
Okay.
No.
So you thought it was, or
it wasn't.
That's the mask you project.
Yeah, the mask was that. Hey, we're good. We're involved with church. We got things going on.
Okay.
We're having great stuff.
We got the white picket fence and all that.
Yeah. And my job is going well.
Okay.
So obviously, what I'm doing to cover my scars and deal with all this stuff is obviously fine. It's obviously fine.
Okay.
Wasn't fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't fine.
So then what was the turning point?
Yeah, I've asked myself this question so many times, and there are multiple turning points. Number one, when I became a Christian in 2015, I was really blessed to have somebody kind of like you referred to earlier, someone that's not rich and famous and powerful. That was my wise counsel, my just astute, educated, amazing person. The weird dichotomy about this is the more I drank and was dealing with all my trauma and stuff from combat and stuff from my childhood and inadequacies, the closer I found myself in my walk with faith, which are completely opposite. The more I went to church and dug into things on my faith walk, the more it dug up stuff that made me want to drink more to suppress. So that went on for quite a while. I passed out so many times at my house. Just was not doing a lot of great things. I had a little incident before one of my deployments, that last deployment, where I essentially picked a fight with a guy. This time I wasn't drinking, but I was just not in a good state where I was just like hyper aggressive. I ended up picking a fight with this guy in the neighborhood, which kind of went bad and, whatever. I mean, it didn't turn into a fight, but a lot of legal stuff and whatever else. But deep down in my heart, I knew how much I loved my wife and my kids.
Yeah.
And it was getting to I just talked to my wife about this recently. Although she never gave me an ultimatum, we never had the words of the D word or any of these things. I knew it then that it was going down that road, and she did too. I know now that it was a lot closer. She thought it was a lot closer than my alcohol-riddled brain was, right?
Yeah.
But by the grace of God, before my 2019 deployment, I pretty much drank up until that point. And I got deployed. Obviously, on this deployment to Saudi Arabia, you're not allowed to drink. So what did I decide to do when I was there? Finish college and read and tear apart my brain with everything I could get my hands on. See, when you're battling your demons and you're using alcohol, it's easy to suppress all of them and you think it's okay. I didn't have that option, but I still wasn't done working on them.
Yeah.
This was the opportunity I had to dig into myself. This was the God-designed plan for me to deploy and be in an area where that wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
So I wasn't tempting me. So I had no choice. I had no choice but to deal with it. When I got back, I had maybe one or two drinks casually, thinking that it was okay. And I do believe it's okay to this day. I'm not here to pontificate on the whole disease thing. But I realized then that a lot of the things that I had worked on were still present. My wife actually asked me, this is the craziest thing. She says, you don't drink to suppress any more of that. No. She said, I've always wondered, I never really asked you this. I said, what's that, baby? She goes, I just wonder if all those things that were in your brain that made you drink are still there. And I instantly answered, absolutely. See, drinking doesn't make them go away. Therapy doesn't make them go away. Reading, podcasts, none of these things actually go away. It just enables you and teaches you different ways to deal with them, work through them, lessen them, right? And this is my opinion. Sure, if you have a broken arm, you can mend it. It's never, it seems to be fine, but it was always broken. What I've found is I was suppressing them and not dealing with them, but I'm here to tell you, I didn't realize how strong I was.
Yeah.
I was capable of dealing with this. I just didn't know how to.
Yeah.
I realize now, and men out there, you're capable of dealing with this. You don't have to suppress it. Now, many of us do, myself included. But the longer I went without that suppression, I was able to really pour into it. And when you're around all these people and you have, at night when you have all these hours to yourself, you have no choice but to work on it.
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself then. So the question you asked me, George, is how do I deal with it? When I'm sitting there in Saudi Arabia after hours, I'm asking myself, what do I value? Do I value this new relationship I have with God? Do I value this amazing woman and these children?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is undoubtedly yes. So do I value that, or do I value suppressing my emotions? And luckily for me, the overriding factor of that was my relationship with God, my family, my friends, my loved ones, my relationships. And the longer I went without it, and the more I could untie those knots one by one, the easier it was. And I know it sounds like I say it's easy to untie those knots, but essentially imagine if you had to deal with something where you had no choice but to think about it, and all of the bad behaviors that you ever wanted to do to help yourself weren't available.
Yeah.
You're strong enough to not be crippled by that. We're amazing human beings designed by God. You have the ability to get through that. Everyone says do hard things. they don't just mean an ultra marathon.
No.
They don't just mean that. They don't mean Ironmans.
Read a book.
They mean sit in silence with the gospel. They have a hard conversation with somebody and expose yourself, maybe somebody that you've never met before, and be willing to have those hard I can tell you guys out there, ultra marathons may be tough. Looking at somebody that you love and telling them something they don't want to hear and telling them how wrong you were and how sorry you were for being like this, that's equally as hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest thing I've ever done in my life was having to confess to my wife that I'd been unfaithful.
Absolutely.
Like, I can't think of anything I was more terrified of in my life. Like, that was, you want to talk about, like, pre-game jitters or whatever. That was, like, the amount of, like, oh, my gosh, my life is over type of feeling. Yeah, I mean, it's necessary. Like,
so it is.
I'm glad you had that chance. What's your advice for people who don't get that opportunity to get sent somewhere where that's not an option?
Yeah, that's a really good one.
What did you learn in that process that people can take from that? Because it's not just alcohol, right? We have a world now where there are so many distractions, and most of them are easy to hide. Video games, pornography, watching sports too much. Like, anything can become that thing that is sucking you in so much that it's pulling from the rest of your life, you know? What did you learn in that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're absolutely right. There seem to be nowadays, there always has been. There's a million things that we can distract ourselves with. For me, what it boiled down to was, this may be a good time to talk about, and I know you're going to, but this is a shameless plug that's actually a perfect representation. People have often asked me, and you guys, you and your team lately, and all your guests have done an amazing job talking about legacy. It's one of my favorite topics. It's why I called myself Dash Legacy.
Yeah, so I did want to ask.
Yeah,
what's
I'll
the
say
name?
it now. So years ago, I was hiking Coco Head in Hawaii, and I was setting up my new watch, and I decided to add, I wasn't sure what to do with it. So I had heard once before that dash on your headstone is the only representation we have in this world. Birth, dash, death. So I came up with the phrase Dash Legacy. Why legacy? Is because legacy is generally used in a positive connotation for what we remembered, how we impact, what we do while we're on this side of the earth. So I literally named my little app thing for climbing Coco Head Dash Legacy 79. Then years later, when I talked about how I wanted to give back to others and help and do what I can with my God-given ability to talk, obviously I love to talk, and build relationships and have these great communities, I thought, what better way to do it? And my wife is on social media, and she's awesome. She was like, well, don't just talk about it, be about it. Start a platform, do your thing. So I decided Dash Legacy.
I love that.
So it's essentially that dash, and others do it too. Other people, Medal of Honor recipient Dakota Meyer has an offshoot called Own the Dash. A lot of people do this. It's just my version of it. It's a catchy title. 79 was the year I was born. Here's one of the things I did. And the Coco Head thing was after that, but I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but I've made mention of this before. I've actually had dreams where I'm looking down at my headstone, even before the Dash Legacy name.
Yeah.
I'm looking down at my headstone. It's been supplanted more and more since then. I'm looking down at my headstone, but the words on there, outside of my name and the years, the words below it are really faint. Now, in my vision, because of my military career, for out there listening, I'm envisioning a military-looking marker. The white, half circle. That's what I'm envisioning in my head, guys. So
the kind of like white marble.
Yeah, the white marble half kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I can't see the words. Like, words are being put on there, but I can't see what they are. So I think it's up to me now to define, what's it going to say?
Yeah.
Is it going to say beloved husband and father? Is it going to say soldier? Is it going to say drunk? Is it going to say full of guilt and shame till his last breath?
Yeah.
Is it going to say could never mend the relationship with his father? Et cetera. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So it was thoughts like that, going back to the time with my dad. I thought, I'm overusing alcohol. I'm not being present with my wife. I'm not being hardly what I really, even close to what I need to be for my, at the time, 2 kids.
Mm.
How am I different?
Yeah.
Because the best way, now remember, I hadn't had this epiphany moment with my dad yet.
Yeah.
So what hurt? What do you think started to hurt me now? I'm doing the things that I claimed he did.
Right.
Am I the best version of myself? Because I was so mad at my dad for stuff that, yes, he did, and a lot of things he didn't do. I've told myself tirelessly my whole life up until recently, I don't want to be like him.
Yeah.
I'm better. I'm stronger. I'm faster. I'm wiser. I'm a better parent. Well, here I am sitting in Saudi Arabia. The method was different, but I'm not there.
Yeah.
I may be physically there, but I'm not mentally there, George. I'm thinking about my next drink. I'm thinking about how I'm going to hide it at work. I'm thinking about my next Army mission, maybe my civilian job. I'm thinking about me. I'm being selfish. I'm thinking I need to deal with my demons. I don't care what you guys are doing. And in the meantime, I am just as guilty of what I thought my father was doing.
Yeah.
So how dare I sit here and cast all this blame on my father when I have the unique ability to be completely different and I'm not.
Yep.
So God, thank you for this opportunity. So the advice that I give, since I had that opportunity to deploy and get away from it and never look back, the advice I have is there's a version out there for everybody of looking down at your headstone. And I don't mean to say that in a morbid way. I say that in a
you're future casting what you want to do with the time you have left.
So what you have here, if you look around to those most valuable things, bring honor to those. And if what you're living is bringing honor to those relationships, then you're on the right path.
Yep.
We talked earlier about looking in the mirror. If things that you're doing or thinking are not bringing honor to your marriage, to your children, to your coworkers, to your tribe, then that's when you really have to think about it. And we're not talking about a radical shift here. We're talking about what a pastor said to me, which I love this phrase. It's about making the next best decision.
Yep.
It's not the one that's going to change everything. Yeah. It's the next
right
one.
move. Yep.
So for me, it was what's the next best decision? When I get home from Saudi Arabia, I will continue to read and journal and finish my college.
That's good.
I will continue to try to be slow with my temper and anger, right? So that was my version of a next best decision. So the advice is, if you don't find yourself in there, if you don't find a way that somebody in life or God has given you this opportunity to break away from your demons or your vices, you and I both know when we look in the mirror if we're doing something that's not bringing credit upon our family or our relationships.
Definitely.
So guys out there, make the next best decision, which means when you see your kid kicking the ball, if that's the time, go out there and kick the ball. Don't jump on your phone.
Yeah.
Tell yourself all the hard things you need to tell yourself to be the best version of you can. Everybody says that phrase, let's be the best version of ourselves. I'm here to tell everybody out there, there's no litmus test, guys. Nobody is grading you on the best version of yourself except those most important, valued relationships in your life. I talk about this all the time. If you don't cherish those innermost valuable relationships in your life, then all the other stuff doesn't matter.
Yep.
Right? So that's the advice I would give to everybody. If you're slightly off the path, your chosen path, not my path. If you stay at the bar and you're lingering for that extra drink, you may not even care about the alcohol, but you care that you want to get home and you just had a fight with your wife and you don't want to have that interaction. So you linger at the bar till she falls asleep. These are the things I'm talking about.
Yeah,
these are the small things that have some deleterious impacts on long-term success, right?
Yep. That's good, man. Well, thank you for being honest about your experience. I know it's probably not the easiest thing to share.
Super fine.
I want to go into a couple fatherhood questions. So what's a piece of advice that you wish you would have had on the front end?
Wow.
This is something that someone you wish would have told you early on.
Yeah. Well, 2 things on that that stick out to me in my own personal journey. I will tell you, in the growth mindset and the masculinity era and all these things, it is totally okay to love your children well and meet them at their point of need, despite all of the stereotypes and things that go along with male, female dynamics, etc. If I would have felt that way early on, knowing it's okay to lead with love and compassion doesn't make you weak, doesn't mean you're a weak man or a weak father, I know that I would have a better relationship with my two of my middle and my oldest. If somebody would have told me, you can love first and still then have discipline. You can love first and still have structure and respect. See, I went into both of those because they were adopted. I went into both of those opposite. I felt, because of my military background and my hyper-focusedness, hyper-intensity, what better way to establish, just like the military, right? Guilty of my own design and love. Mm-hmm. What better way to establish structure in their young lives than to create structure, discipline? And I'm not saying hyper-discipline. I'm not saying like waking up at 05 with a bed check. I mean like, okay, very structure. Here's what we're doing. Here's how we're talking. Here's kind of the respect. Here's the house rules, right? Not a lot of grace was given from me to them early on in their lives. And for all you out there listening, hit me up on this. You guys hear me loud and clear on this one. I failed. I failed that part of my fatherhood with my children. And I can't take it back now. But if I give any advice to any father going forward, I will say, you're never going to go to your deathbed and think, I shouldn't have loved him as much.
Right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being honest about that as well. I mean, we've all made loads of mistakes. Yeah. And I was certainly just as guilty of still being Mr. Army when I came home. And that's where I think this is a great point to talk about this, the alter ego effect. I highly recommend if you're that type of guy where you're in a job or you have a profession that's really kind of all-consuming, I strongly encourage you to read that book, The Alter Ego Effect, because it teaches you how to show up as the best version of yourself for the right situation. And so the best Army version of us was not the best husband or best father version. Yeah. And it's a very common thing that we struggle with because, like we said earlier, men, we love to identify with what we do. It becomes, where we grew up and all that kind of stuff. Like it's very hard to shift that. And so, excuse me, that book really outlines that extremely well. And something I've improved in is, my role as a husband and as a dad is significantly different than when I'm at work or when I'm doing Army stuff in my part-time role. And
yeah, I found that you brought that. We talked about that before the show started, and I will tell you that's something I still struggle with because, and I say because not as an excuse, it's because I'm still working on this. Is a lot of times in our chosen professions, that sort of style is not appreciated. What you do in one and what you do in the other, sometimes they're so opposite that if one bleeds over to the other, then you're accused of something, right? That's, I know for me, right? Like if I'm too loving, not really, but too loving in Army, it gets viewed a certain way. If I'm too militant here, it gets viewed a certain way. Yeah. So then I have to add value to that. Would I rather be too soft or too loving of a leader and get made fun of? No. So that means I'm okay with being too hard here because I can get what they're saying because they love me. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want them to put me down as a bad leader. So I'll just be rigid all the time there. If they put me down as being too rigid, well, they love me. They're okay. Our close people is who we hurt the most. So I'm willing to hurt them unknowingly. Yeah. Because I know that they're always going to be there for me, right? That's something I've struggled with. Yeah. I struggle with it's like, I don't mean to hurt you. But in the back of my head, my subconscious is like, but you love me. So that's what we do in life. So that's the struggle I have. So that's why I've poured into this whole other, more, I say, philosophical side these last, really since 2019 until present. Okay. I've tried to reshape the way I've been engaging with these young leaders. I've got all the technical ability as not anybody else, but as I'm pretty up there when it comes to that. What I'm finding more value in is meeting them. So what I'm doing is like what I referred to yesterday or 2 days ago when I talked to my mom, as real-time repentance, right? So real-time repentance, it's a made-up phrase, which is...
Well, all phrases are made up.
Yeah,
but...
yeah. Well, no one's heard it until now. Is I'm doing I mean repentance and apologizing in the biblical term, but I'm trying to make up for all the lost time I had. So when I see these young leaders...
You're trying to pay it forward.
It's indicative of how I was awful and not where I needed to meet my children.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of scarring them, like I may or may not have scarred my kids, I'm learning from that mistake, and I definitely am learning that with my little guy who's only 5. I'm a completely different person now, which he's getting the benefit of, and my other kids, hopefully we can get. I mean, we're not like at odds. But I'm looking at my own growth and realizing that I didn't meet them at their needs. So now when I see these young soldiers and young leaders, I don't want them to have a figure in their life that's like I was for them.
Yep.
So this is my opportunity to pour into them. Much like I said, if I'm the first person in their life at 18 that tells them, I'm proud of you, I will gladly do that for their service to this nation and all the things they've done, right? I don't want to be this version for anybody in my life ever again.
Yeah.
And it's really sad that it happened to be with my 2 kids. And the redemptive grace that God gives us, I'm working past that.
Yeah.
And I can't change that. But like you said, I can pay it forward over here and be the best version I can in every area of my life from the lessons that I've learned. Real-time repentance.
Yeah.
Pay it forward.
Well, I mean, you can still continue to be the right dad now.
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. I can't change it, but I can just try to recognize it and say, like, man, that was...
Well, that's all any of us can ever do, right? If you are or have been in the wrong, is to own it, apologize for it, and then practically implement new ways of being better.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Excuse me. What is... Maybe it was what you just said. What's your biggest regret as a dad?
Yeah, that's
with I guess like a lesson to take from it as well.
Yeah, the biggest regret I have as a dad is kind of twofold. It's kind of dad and husband, but my wife and I have talked about this recently. I know that there's times as a father and as a husband that I have put, even though I've been a reservist now for a long time, I don't have a quote unquote like part-time Army brain, as we talked about with hyper-focus.
Yeah.
I've never had that. Even when I got off active duty, I've never had that. I only am a soldier part-time.
Mm-hmm.
I've been very successful in the Army because of that.
Yeah.
A lot of these things I've been lucky and blessed to do and worked hard for is not saying that other reservists can't do that, but you get what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
So because of that, my regret is that I have knowingly put that part of my life ahead of my children and my spouse.
Yeah.
And it's by the grace of God that I have them and they love me, and I love my wife more than anything. And my children.
Yeah.
And I have realized that over these last few years. And I have poured tirelessly into my military career. And I'm very, very close to achieving a lifelong goal and dream of that. So somehow for me, at times it's felt like it's worth it. But the lesson is there's always going to be something that if we're not set on the right course, we can always find ways to put something above those most important things and rationalize it.
There's always one more thing.
There's always going to be another rank. There's always going to be another goal.
The next bonus, the next bonus, sale, whatever.
The next podcast guest, right?
Yep.
There's always going to be something. So as a cautionary tale, my one regret is I should have done a better job at prioritizing those most important relationships in my life at an early age. And I think that's why now, like many reformists, I think that's why now I'm so hyper focused on, my messages and all that, because not everybody is going to get to hear this in-depth look at me and you.
They're just going to get the sound bite.
They're going to get the sound bites, and that's really good. And I think that's why I'm pouring so much into it, because I used to struggle with not being a hard skills master. And what I say by that is I'm an expert in many things in the Army at this point in my career. but I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a lawyer. And I used to hate that. I used to hate that I was considered like a soft skills expert, good at speaking, good at relationships, good at those social things.
Mm-hmm.
But the last bunch of years, and more so in the last 2, I've realized that I feel an intense amount of joy and satisfaction in these conversations, being in community with guys like you and all of your listeners. I really enjoy this. So I've been pouring into that. So that's the lesson is I wish I could have done a better job recognizing how I was not prioritizing those most important relationships. And I'm so grateful and thankful for my faith walk and my family, and especially in this very specific case, my father, that he was so loving and patient that he hung on to the bumper of that car with a death grip for 32 years, praying probably every day that I would stop the car and let him in.
Yeah.
So it's all those things that I'm so grateful for, and that's the lesson. The lesson is learn, there's a lot of lessons, but
get your priorities straight.
Get your priorities straight. We know what they are. Everybody out there listening, you know what your priorities are. You know the difference between what's best for the good of the group and your family and what's going to just bring credit upon yourself. Or if you're a man of faith, you know what things you should do to bring credit to God.
Yep.
We know these to be true. There's enough evidence, there's enough information out there in 2024 that you can pretty much guarantee some of the core things that you should be doing.
Yep.
And if you're not doing those, it's okay, because you can live in the moment and you can course correct today, right now. The end of this, you can turn this off. Day 1. Like you just said, it's day 1. You have to show up as the best version of yourself tomorrow. That's what you said on your thing.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is not promised. I said that recently. You have to show up today.
Yeah.
Day 1.
Well, thanks for being honest on that one.
Yeah, of course.
All right, let's end on a quick happy one.
Absolutely.
Favorite fatherhood moment? Just like best memory that jumps out at you.
Oh gosh, favorite father. I've got so many favorite. Since I've got 3 kids. I'll even just use the ones I get all the time. My little guy today, they had character day at his school, so he's 5. He's really into X-Men.
Okay.
He's really into all these things. He wore his military uniform today.
Oh, nice.
His favorite character was an Army guy. So
very cool.
I'll say this just to paraphrase, because there's so many moments. I will say it is a happy note, but I feel so lucky the fact that my kids still look and say things about me, and we have these amazing my older ones. Not that we're bad, but anytime they do something that reminds them of me, and they're so honored that I'm their dad, and they show me so much love, is such a memory to me, because on the whole other side of my head, I'm thinking that I don't deserve the love that they're showing me because of everything, but they are, and they're showing up for me every day, and my wife is showing up for me every day. So just all of those things where I'm reminded that I am doing okay.
Yep.
And the redemptive quality that we all have allows my little guy to wear his Army uniform, allows my oldest daughter to want to get matching tattoos with me at some point. You said the one thing I always say, so I'll say I'll use my oldest, because she's my oldest. And, we have this thing that, you said something the other day on your story where you have this thing that you do with your daughter.
Yeah.
So we had this thing, my daughter and I had this thing where we bumped elbows every time. We would, 2 things. I used to lift her up and push her head against the ceiling at daycare and school and bonk her head because she thought it was cute.
Yep.
And then we would say, hey, I love you. We would tap elbows, and we would say, be safe and sound, which later was like a techno song. So every time we heard that, we would do like the elbow mimic. That's probably one of the oldest, fondest memories I have, because her and I have been doing that little ritual since she was, I would say 4.
That's
so
awesome.
She's turning 20 on Sunday. So from
nice.
16, so that's a long-standing great memory.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Creating those traditions.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
All right. Where can people find you?
Okay, well, I just recently started a Facebook, which obviously tells you guys my age.
The old
right?
book face.
The old book of face. But my main platform and the main thing that I'm pouring into and want to do is _legacy79. Spell it out, DASHLEGACY 79 at Instagram. I do my best to post videos, every day. I talked a little bit about this. I do a lot of stand-up stuff. I believe that my content and the things that I do, like we talked about, resonate with so many people. I really just want people to build communities, build their legacies. Every single day you have the opportunity to build a legacy and craft a legacy.
Yeah.
I know I kind of made it catchphrasy, but it's because there's a point behind it. The point behind it is reputation can go either way. They either have a good or a bad reputation. It's very, very infrequently that you say somebody has a bad legacy. So I want people to hear legacy, and I want that to be a positive reminder of a great thing that they can do to impact each other, their community, their loved ones each day. And I really want to target the next generation of great leaders in any industry that they're in. So all that to say, _legacy79, Instagram, hit me up, send me a message, let me know what's going on. Tell me how I can listen. Tell me how I can hear your story. And again, I love to be in community with everybody. So that's where I'm at.
Grant, I love it, man. So go give him a follow. He's your videos are short, to the point, and they're like daily affirmations. They're awesome.
Well, thank you.
You're definitely gonna love it. It's good stuff. Thanks for being very vulnerable and honest with your story today. And first in-person podcast in the books. You're a real veteran now. You're a podcast pro.
Absolutely. And I'm honored to be here. I love your message. I love your team. I love what you're doing. I want to thank you too. You showed a lot of vulnerability on your episodes as well. And I think you have the charisma and the personality that, you invite people in by the way you interact. And I can see that in your videos. I can see that here. So kudos to you, man.
You.
Like, your story is amazing. How you're shaping the next generation of these men is awesome. And I'm really humbled to be just a small part of it, man. It's so awesome to be here, brother.
We're all just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the more we just help each other out like this, we're all going to get better. So,
absolutely.
Hey, man, thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Enough talk, dads. Let's get climbing. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.